Well, greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, the notorious RMB, here for Robservations live chat number 169. Or as Bill and Ted would say, 69, dude. Anyway, I want to welcome all of you, you imagination connoisseurs, to the Post-Geek Singularity community. Another fantastic chat. And boy, do we have a subject that was sort of tailor-made for me that just suddenly popped up on my Facebook page because of Patrick Stewart himself. Yes, that's right. Patrick Stewart posted a poster, or I guess the new ad, if you want to call it a poster. It's the key art, the new key art, the second piece of key art for the new Star Trek Picard series that is currently in production, that has already gone through one showrunner and replaced Alex Kurtzman with Michael Chabon, or Michael Chabon, or I just say Chabon, Michael Chabon, who I love. I love his work. I love his books. I was kind of excited about having Michael Chabon aboard Star Trek. I didn't like his short trek, which took place 1,000 years in the future, but whatever. Anyway, I want to remind everyone that these chats are brought to you by Lucky Tiger Men's grooming products for those men who want to look good and feel great. And if you go to getluckytiger.com and you punch in PGS when you order anything, you get 20% off your order, which is pretty damn cool. So, as we know, the first poster for the Star Trek Picard series came out, and it showed us a vineyard. Now, as everyone who's a Star Trek fan worth their salt knows, Picard's family in Star Trek in The Next Generation was established as owning a vineyard in Le Bar, France. And okay, so the Picard family has a vineyard in France. We saw this in the fourth season episode Family. That was the second episode of the fourth season. After we saw The Best of Both Worlds Part 2, a damaged Picard went home and went to his family vineyard where he saw his older brother, Robert, and Robert's wife, played by Samantha Eggar, who was in The Brood. So that was pretty cool. Cronenberg's The Brood. I was always excited about that. And the only other time that we ever saw the Picard family vineyard in the series was in the very last episode, All Good Things, where in a fictional future, well, fictional as far as Star Trek is concerned, we know Star Trek is fictional, but in one of many possible futures, we saw Picard tending to the vines in his family vineyard in the beginning of that episode. So in the 178 episodes of Star Trek The Next Generation, we saw the Picard vineyard twice. In episode 177 and in the second episode of the fourth season of Next Generation. While it's interesting to me that we have now received two pieces of main key art from the new Star Trek Picard series, which by all reports is the most expensive Star Trek series ever produced. I've heard people say $400 million for 10 episodes or something. I mean, I know that episodes of Discovery were between 12 and 15 for the first season and perhaps more for the second. We've seen shakeups in every season of Discovery, and now we've seen a shakeup, a changeover of the showrunner in the middle of producing Picard. So clearly the way these shows, the most expensive Star Trek shows ever made are the first two seasons of Discovery and the upcoming Star Trek Picard, by a margin, probably by a factor of 10. They're incredibly expensive shows to produce, and some of the most, if not the most, expensive television shows of all time. Anyway, so to me, to my mind, the idea of a Star Trek Picard series is the single most exciting thing that's come out of Star Trek in the last 10 years. I am no fan of what J.J. Abrams, what Bad Robot did with the Star Trek franchise. I have hated all three of the Star Trek films to varying degrees, although I find some things to like about all of them. I was no fan of Star Trek 09. I think Star Trek Into Darkness is one of Star Trek's darkest moments from a creative standpoint. And Star Trek Beyond, as much as I love Justin Lin and the Fast and the Furious franchise, I thought it was pretty much gobbledygook. And I feel that, and you've heard me say this a lot, For the last 10 years, everybody involved with the Star Trek franchise has done everything they can to turn Star Trek into something else. And it hasn't worked because you can't take something like Star Trek and turn it into something else, because then it's no longer what it was to begin with. And none of it's succeeded. I don't care what anybody says. Star Trek 09 and Star Trek Into Darkness were not successful movies. And certainly Star Trek Beyond wasn't either. Now, you can throw box office all you want at me, but if you look in terms of how much those movies cost and how much those movies cost to market, none of them were very successful. But that's neither here nor there. I want the Star Trek Picard series to be great. I really do. But what I find strange, now we've had two pieces of key art. One was just a vineyard with, by the way, a Delta shield in it. That was not the next generation Delta shield, or the chevron, as we call it, the insignia. It was the original series' insignia. This, just as a Star Trek fan, look, clearly what Star Trek has been trying to do for the last 10 years is to broaden the appeal of Star Trek beyond the fan base. But here's the thing. Here's what I would say, and this is a mistake that everybody always makes. They assume that the kind of people that are already Star Trek fans are aging out of the franchise, so they have to appeal or try and make the franchise appeal to a broader base. This, my friends, is the ultimate in wrong think. It doesn't work, because the same kind of people that Star Trek would appeal to are young as well. It's not there wasn't a certain kind of person that was minted in a certain vintage that Star Trek would appeal to, and they're aging out, so we have to change Star Trek to make it appeal to more people. No, the kind of people that Star Trek appeals to have been born every day. They exist every age, every shape, every size, every color, every creed, whatever, every belief system. The people that are going to like Star Trek are a certain kind of person that has always existed and will always exist. The people that gravitate towards Star Trek are a certain kind of people. They're people that are forward thinking. They're predominantly intelligent people, and they're people that are ultimately optimistic about the future. That's what kind of people you're catering to. Now, you can't go after Star Trek fans or try and create new Star Trek fans by turning Star Trek into other franchises or other things that are currently successful. I mean, first it was Star Wars. Now it's Guardians of the Galaxy or The Expanse. That's what they keep trying to turn Star Trek into. And by doing that, you're failing. You're going to fail. And we repeatedly keep seeing this kind of failure. And I think what we're seeing from the key art, now all we've seen from the Picard series is a brief teaser of some footage. Presumably it's Starfleet Command or something, the Academy, I don't know what it was. And the characters are wearing next generation-esque uniforms 20 years on, even though we've seen in Star Trek canon, those uniforms were outmoded anyway. I mean, as a Star Trek fan, I have been bewildered by all of the promotion that we've been getting for the Star Trek Picard series. None of it makes sense to me at all. First of all, they're using the TOS Star Trek font, as in Star Trek, the original series, to promote this show. It's on the artwork for the new posters. Why they're doing that, I don't know. Now, I understand that that font has come to represent all of Star Trek. They're trying to use that as a generic Star Trek font. But anybody who grew up with Star Trek or who collected the merchandise or any of those things understands that each Star Trek series has its own font. I mean, it has its own, if you look at the abbreviations or you look at the merchandise, look at the side of an Eagle Moss box for Star Trek ships. There's different logos for each show. And it doesn't make sense to me from the get-go that they're using the TOS Star Trek. And I get it. I get that's supposed to be the generic Star Trek font, but that's not what Star Trek The Next Generation was identified by. I mean, Star Trek The Next Generation really had two fonts. They had the TV series Star Trek font, and then they had the words Star Trek as they were written on the movie posters, the various movie posters. And none of them ever used the TOS Star Trek font to represent the show. Okay, that's fine. But already the messages they're sending to the fan base, much less everybody else, I don't understand that from the beginning. And I understand I'm now talking about two pieces of key art. But these two pieces of key art are like building to some reveal. First, you saw the first poster was literally a vineyard. Now, in the case of Picard, this vineyard was not someplace he ever wanted to be. He went there in the episode Family because he was a defeated, broken man after his experience becoming Locutus, being sort of assimilated by the Borg and forced into a situation where his knowledge was used to kill thousands of Starfleet officers. Then he went back home to this place that represented the last place in the world he wanted to be, with his overbearing brother, the family that he left. He was never supposed to be there. Now, in All Good Things, the final episode of Star Trek The Next Generation, when we see him in the beginning of that episode on the farm, on the vineyard, tending to his vines, and Geordi comes to visit him, this is not the place we want to see Captain Picard. This is the place, they've used it twice now. They use it in Family, they use it in All Good Things. When we see the future that presumably never, ever happens because it was sort of a Q-infused future, when we see Picard there, it's sad. It's sad that Captain Picard is on the vineyard tending to his vines. And even when Geordi comes to visit him, and I understand he's got a syndrome that's taking away from his ability to, his mental faculties are going away, and that was something established. But it's sad. Either way, the two times that the vineyard in Le Bar, France, that Picard is from, his homestead, both of the times that we've seen him at this vineyard have not been good times. So it's been a place that we're happy as an audience and as Star Trek fans and as Picard fans that he's away from. He doesn't belong in that vineyard. Now, perhaps that's where the producers of this show want the Picard series to start out as. We want to immediately tell you what we're telling the audience is this show starts on a bummer of a note. Somehow Picard is back at the vineyard where it's not a place he wants to be, and we're going to send him off on adventures. Now, this I get the idea, but what's interesting to me about this is, let's just talk about the series. There's 178 episodes of Star Trek The Next Generation. 178. And yet, this imagery of this vineyard, which only appears in 2 of those episodes, both of those times, not exactly great memories. I mean, we literally see Picard fighting with his brother, rolling around in the mud as they're fighting in the vineyard in Family. Now, Family is one of the greatest episodes of Star Trek The Next Generation. But what's so great about that episode is it reaffirms exactly where Picard, like Kirk before him, belongs, and that is somewhere out amongst the stars. So the fact that we now have this second key art that was released today, both as a still image and as a motion capture, a motion poster, whatever you want to call it, a GIF, whatever it is. And then there's also presumably a giant planet in orbit around Earth, if you look at the motion poster. Now, I don't want to be a bummer. I really want this show to be great, but the fact that they've already changed showrunners once, and Michael Chabon has taken over as showrunner, a man who's never produced television before, and now he's in charge of producing one of the most expensive TV shows ever made. He might be a great writer, but as showrunner, I don't understand. And now, I also don't understand, as Star Trek is an allegorical action-adventure science fiction show that has endured now for over 50 years. The first initial 40 years, it was telling allegorical stories about our world today, but in the context of a futuristic science fiction action adventure series. That's what Star Trek does. Now, it looks to me, from what we've seen from this show and the way they're trying to bill it and sell it to us, that immediately Picard is in a place where he doesn't want to be. He's on the vineyard. Things have taken a dark turn. We're going to see a Captain Picard who is not a happy camper. And I wonder, why? Why is that? Now, to me, what's really interesting when you watch a character like Jean-Luc Picard age and get old. By the way, I know nothing about the Picard series. I've seen the character descriptions, and they all seem to me like variations on a theme, variations on very familiar themes. A group of space misfits come together to go off on some adventure, and they have to get along with one another and figure out how to work together. But in this case, they're going to surround Jean-Luc Picard, which is fine. I guess you can tell that story in a Star Trek context if that's what you want to do. But here's the thing. This is a show, the Star Trek Picard series, I think of all the shows I've ever seen, there is more goodwill and more hope and desire wanting this show to be great than just about any TV series I can possibly imagine. Everybody wants to see this show, and everybody wants it to be great. And yet, what they're showing us, what they're giving us, we're supposed to be, literally as a lifelong Star Trek fan, I don't need to list my bona fides here, but let's just say I certainly, as a Star Trek fan, I certainly have earned my wings, I guess, and I've earned my ability to opine on these subjects. And I am fascinated by how they are selling us this show, and how the glimpses that we've seen. The first clip we saw, presumably a Star Trek Picard. We saw a cadet at Starfleet Academy who doesn't know who Jean-Luc Picard is. Now, as somebody like myself who prides himself on verisimilitude and wanting to create reality within the proscenium of the frame, I'm like, how are you going to Starfleet Academy and not knowing who Jean-Luc Picard is? Like, in any way, shape, or form, how would that fly? So immediately, the first clip they showed us, I'm like, I as a knowledgeable, educated viewer of entertainment and a consumer of stories, I look at that. That's the first clip they released, and I thought to myself, I don't believe this. I understand from on paper that, oh, I get it. You're gonna try and make Picard, he's over the hill, he's embittered, he's old, whatever. That was because what they're doing is, yes, let's make it allegorical to everyone's life. Let's take the easiest way possible. Is that a Star Trek way to do things? See, here's the great thing about what Star Trek used to be. It was inherently at its core about the best of humanity going out into the final frontier and trying to do good in the face of the ultimate mystery of the universe. And that's, I think, at its core, that's what Star Trek is. It's about the best of humanity going up against the infinitude of the universe, all of the unanswered questions of existence. And rather than shy away from those questions, we are going to boldly go and answer those questions no matter what is out there. And at the same time, we're going to try and espouse the values that we as human beings, the best of the best, we're trying to do that and take those questions and our own answers into the universe with us and do good. So the idea that you're going to base a Star Trek show on perhaps one of the greatest Star Trek characters of all, if perhaps not the greatest, I would say James T. Kirk is the greatest, but many people grew up with Jean-Luc Picard, and he is clearly one of the most beloved Star Trek characters. I get it. You're going to want to show him in a light from a dramatist's standpoint, to show Picard bummed out, to show Picard over the hill. I get it. Like, as an actor, Patrick Stewart, who's very involved with the creation of the show, for him, that's attractive because as an actor, he can play something there. And I'm not saying that we have to shy away from these things, but I'm led I wonder, after looking at this key art that just really leans on this image of the vineyard and wine and vintage, and I get all that. The idea of wine, you always want to drink wine that's properly aged. I understand all that, even though I think it's a bit heavy-handed, a bit didactic. I'm not really sure if that's what they're going for and that's what they're leaning into. Is this the kind of Star Trek show that everybody's going to be clamoring for? Now, I'll flat out say I've really enjoyed some of the reporting that Midnight's Edge and Gary Beekler over at Nerdrotic have been doing, reporting on things that have happened. Um, some of their stuff, a lot of it, as they say, rumors and speculation. And I can only speak to the fact that I personally, in my professional career, making documentaries for the Star Trek Blu-rays while I was in the employ of CBS, there was some very interesting things that came up regarding Bad Robot and things we could and couldn't say. That's all I can say about my professional association with Star Trek. There is a problem somehow conflating the original Star Trek that we all know and love with the J.J. Abrams era of Star Trek. There was something that caused a problem where you could not mingle these two things. I know that for a fact. So whatever license this show is made under, it's interesting to me that they're weighing in they're using this image of the vineyard to sell the show. Because first of all, if you're not if you're just a casual Star Trek fan, what the hell does that mean? Why do you keep showing a vineyard? And why do you keep showing, say, the chevron, the insignia, the Delta shield? That doesn't belong. It's certainly not the communicator pin of the Next Generation era. So even their marketing is conflated with classic Star Trek, which is a little strange. It's a little weird. Like, why is that the case? Why are they not using Next Generation iconography aside from the vineyard? But again, if you didn't know, like, if you love Captain Jean-Luc Picard and you have a casual interest, I mean, remember, Next Generation went off the air in 1994, which was a long time ago. It was 25 years ago, a quarter of a century ago. And you guys are using this imagery from 2 episodes of a 178 episode series that doesn't exactly scream Star Trek. And now in this, I was going to talk about, like, okay, there's a dog, and I've already seen like Trek Core posting pictures of Janeway with the dog, and of course Archer had a dog, and of course in Star Trek Generations, Kirk was shown having a dog named Buster. Again, something that was way out of left field for that character, but okay. And now Picard has a dog, a la John Wick or whatever. I guess dogs now are something that you just have now. Every sci-fi character gets older, and when they're over the hill, they get a dog, which is fine. I love my dogs. They're great. But I don't understand, if you're trying to generate interest amongst a general audience about the return of one of the greatest fictional characters in science fiction, is this the way to do it? Showing him home on the range with a dog? It's not Unforgiven. It's not Clint Eastwood. We're talking about Jean-Luc Picard, who in the last episode of Star Trek The Next Generation existed in 3 time periods and went up against Q. Why don't they show Q? Why isn't John Delancey a part of the show? I get it. I'm sure Patrick Stewart had a phenomenal experience making Logan, which was a terrific film, and he was really able to play an aging Xavier with mental problems to the hilt. And as an actor, I would say that's fantastic. And I get it. They get him involved in the storytelling, and that's fine. But I don't think that Patrick Stewart, the actor, has the best interests of the Star Trek community, the people that watch the show. That it's a push and pull. It really is. And I look at this poster, and again, I think that the wrong messages, and I would extrapolate the wrong kind of show is it's a bummer. Like, who wants to look at a show of the sun setting magic hour of Captain Picard standing in a vineyard with his dog? Now, I'm not saying that couldn't be an interesting show. Could very well be. Could very well be an interesting show. And look, as far as I'm concerned, if it's a great story, well told, That's terrific. And it does look like the Star Trek Picard series is following the Burnett axiom, which is, say it with me now, never put your universe before your characters or your story. It looks like this is going to be a character-driven story. But knowing what other characters are involved, it's just strange to me. I seeing two pieces of key art that are more about the vineyard and more about the sun setting than it is about where our characters come from and where he might be going is strange. I really don't understand. I mostly don't understand, why am I supposed to be excited about this? I'm excited to see Patrick Stewart come back. That excites me. I'm excited to see him as an older Picard. But, I've read a million different Star Trek novels. I've read a bunch of Star Trek comics. It's not like stories about the future of the Star Trek characters haven't been told before. There was a lot of, well, they were false futures, but there was a lot of shows in the run of Star Trek: The Next Generation that dealt with interesting tapestry, dealt with his past and where he was. Picard was in a different place. And I just feel that when I look at these things, I feel like I'm seeing something that's made by a bunch of people, even this key art, that have never watched Star Trek before. It's just strange to me. It's bizarre that I'm seeing original series iconography in that first Vineyard poster, and now again with the word Star Trek. I guess that's what they're going for. And then of course a dog with that same chevron the on his collar. And I just wonder, in this day and age, who is making these decisions, and who looks at this key art like, it's certainly beautiful, it's pretty, but what is it conveying to your audience? What is it conveying to your core audience? What do you want to take? What do you want to take your audience? What takeaways do you want? You want your audience excited about this, sure, but this show has got to be a home run. It's got to be bases are loaded and your best hitter comes up to the plate and rockets that ball out of the stadium. And you need to get a grand slam from this. This show should be a grand slam, not a show that needs a season to find its sea legs or space legs. This show should be monumental going out of the gate. And I'm certainly not getting that vibe. Now, look, admittedly, these are just pieces of key art. They're meaningless when it comes to the rest of the show. But we already know they switched showrunners in midstream. And my question is, how does this happen? How do you not conceive of a Star Trek Picard series? And how is it not great from the get-go? How is it not what Ryan Coogler did with Creed? Because again, I always use this as an example, but that's the way you take a universe and reboot it. You have somebody who loves what they were doing, loves the universe, and comes up with something new and exciting. And I look at what's going on with this show, and I'm bewildered by it. I'm absolutely bewildered by it. And I don't get it. As a lifelong Star Trek fan, I'm like, I don't understand why the vineyard. I mean, I get it. The idea that Picard is now living back on his family farm, which to me seems absurd anyway. I don't think Picard would even live on Earth. If he wanted to retire, I don't think he's going to go back to France. I don't. I think he would be an archaeology professor. He would be like his mentor that we met in The Chase. I mean, it's such a strange, odd thing. Anyway, I see that a lot of questions are coming in. A lot of people in the chat are firing in chats, and I'm going to get to those right now. Willow Yang, actually, first of all, Draco Era says, I'm a fan of the Star Trek franchise because of the 2009 film. Hey, look, I don't take that away from you. But when you say you're a Star Trek, you're a fan of the franchise, have you gone back and watched the original series and Next Generation and Deep Space Nine and Voyager and Enterprise? But that's the great thing about the Star Trek 2009 film, is that it brought new people in. And I think that's great. I'd be curious to hear, what do you think of the portrayal of the characters after watching, say, Star Trek 2, as opposed to watching Star Trek 2009? And I think that's great. I think it's great that you became a fan with Star Trek 2009, because I think a lot of people did become a fan. New fans were definitely brought in by the new films, and I think that's great. I personally just wish those films were better. and I wish they had more to offer you in terms of intellectual stimulation. But I appreciate that you became a fan of the franchise because of that. I think it's awesome. Willow Yang says, just how many times did you watch all the Star Trek episodes? Your knowledge of what happens in each of them is seriously freaky sometimes. Well, Willow, I studied Star Trek the way theologians study the Old Testament and the New Testament. I probably watched every episode of Star Trek growing up 20 times at least. I mean, there were 79 episodes. I could probably calculate it. There were 79 episodes of the original series. They aired when I was growing up, starting when I was 5 years old, every night at 6 o'clock. So, and I watched them from the time I was 5 to the time I was probably 14 or 15. And I pretty much watched them every night. And then when I had a VCR and missed them, I started copying them or taping them. And then when they were released, pre-recorded tapes were released and then Laserdiscs were released, I watched them then. And then I had jobs, for instance, like when I worked on the Star Trek Experience, cutting all of the videos, I watch them again and I digitize them and watch clips. And I've read every Star Trek novel pretty much, not lately, but for the first up until about 2000, and every reference book. And of course, I worked on Next Generation and Making Free Enterprise, and I've been steeped in Star Trek my entire life, and especially the original series. So I know these episodes pretty much like a back of my hand. Now, do I know them? Could I tell you the call signs of all of the ships? Not all of them. Like, I don't know the NCC number of, say, the Lexington off the top of my head. You know, I know that the Constellation is NCC 1017. The Reliant is what, 1860, NCC 1864, stuff like this. Is it? I think so. I don't remember. But there's so much trivia to know. But I can tell you the storylines and what happens in the episodes like the back of my hand, the characters and all of those things, the scenes, the dialogue, all of that. So yes, I'm very well steeped in Star Trek. And by the way, I'm the last guy in the world they would want to have work on this show. Although one of my favorite Star Trek novelists, David Mack, has just been hired as a consultant for the animated series Star Trek Lower Decks, which is a great thing. I just hope they listen to what he says. I really do. Stubble McShave says, I think the vineyard is the strongest symbol of Picard's life outside of Starfleet. I guess that's the messaging they're after. Is it? Is it though? I mean, why do you say that? We saw the vineyard twice. The first time was a place he reluctantly went back to because he was down on himself. And the second time we saw it as an alternate future that probably would never exist. Now, I understand what it is I don't think it represents Picard. I think what it represents is home. It's an easy way. To me, it's a shortcut. It's a shortcut to be like, it's late. First of all, to me, it's lazy writing. Because that's like, oh, the only place we ever saw in the series is his family's vineyard in France. We saw it there, so that's the place he would go. Why? Nothing that you saw in either one of those episodes would lead you to believe, like, why wouldn't he go live on Romulus? You know, I guess Romulus is blown up now, of course, canonically, but why wouldn't he go live on Vulcan? Why wouldn't he go live somewhere else? Like, why does he have to go back to France? Why does he have to live on a vineyard? I get it, because that imagery is easy. It's easy for everybody to understand. The masses, you don't have to be an imagination connoisseur or a Star Trek fan. You can just look out over which to me is bizarre, because they're asking people to make a leap that only real Star Trek fans would know about anyway. So I think a lot of people, we all know in our imagination connoisseur circle, but I think that if you were to show an audience that didn't know much about Picard, or they're only casual fans, they would look at this and go, why the vineyard imagery? Why are you showing hands on vines? And then people in their minds, they're making these leaps like, okay, so maybe he bought a vineyard somewhere. I mean, it doesn't exactly scream Star Trek. And what's funny is, if you're trying to appeal to the non-Star Trek audience, why then would you lean so heavily into this imagery that only the diehard Star Trek audience is aware of? How are you going after new fans? How are you making anybody aside from the fan base excited about this show. I don't understand. I really don't understand. Anthony Trujillo says, enjoyed Star Trek the film. It could have been shorter. Are you talking about Star Trek the motion picture? I would have liked it to be longer. I just would like to. I would like Star Trek the motion picture to have had the time to be finished properly. That's what I've always wanted. Mark C says, John Byrne confessed he was super close to writing and drawing a TOS comic. Bad Robot is the reason we will never get that amazing work. Oh, I know. For anybody who, look, Bad Robot tried to have all original Star Trek merchandise stopped. Anything that was not Star Trek 09 and beyond, they tried to have it all stopped. And CBS basically said, no way. That's ridiculous. We make this much money off. This is a very valuable, lucrative merchandising. Still the original series as far as merchandising is concerned. And let's face it, as much as Star Trek 09 is liked by some people, it's not like the iconography of Star Trek 09 has supplanted Kirk, Spock, and McCoy, the originals. I mean, that's why I think ultimately it's been bared out that going back and trying to reboot Kirk, Spock, and McCoy was actually a mistake. What they should have done is what Star Trek has always done since they moved forward with The Next Generation in 87, which is move forward, reinvent the concept from the ground up if you want, but don't try and recreate the characters that have become so indelible in the minds of pop culture and the world around you. Of course, that would take a lot of creativity and a lot of risk. And I think the idea that you went and reimagined Kirk, Spock, and McCoy, I mean, Carl Urban's doing a great job as he's recreating DeForest Kelley, but and Kirk and Spock is either angry or he's just not very fun to be around. They did not make people love those characters. You love Kirk, Spock, and McCoy as they've been portrayed for 50 years, and then you saw these characters invoking that, but they themselves never made you love them. And that was the problem. Nobody's waiting for another movie with that original Star Trek cast. They want to see those people do other things. I think the world would rather see Zachary Quinto come back as Sylar in Heroes than they would rather see him play Spock again. Certainly, you don't need Chris Hemsworth to go play George Kirk again. Really? That's what they wanted to do in Star Trek 4? Of course it wasn't going to work. People don't want to see that. They don't care. You know, what they want to see is a great science fiction adventure that stars great characters. They did not make... The great characters are William Shatner as Kirk, Leonard Nimoy as Spock, and DeForest Kelley as Leonard McCoy. You want to recreate those characters? That's fine. You'll never win. You'll never win because those characters, those actors played those characters from 1966. And if you go back to the first pilot, even longer, but 1966 all the way up through Next Generation in the case of Leonard Nimoy, and then in Generations in the case of William Shatner. So let's go from, let's say, 66 to 94. They play those characters for almost 30 years, and that pop culture knows that. You try and go and recast those roles with somebody and go, no, this is the new Kirk, Spock, and McCoy. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. It's never going to work. But anyway, that's just me. Alexander Wilson says, cadets not knowing Picard is very analogous to today's cadet. There are military cadets today who don't know who General Colin Powell is. That's real. Okay. Perhaps. But on a galactic scale, with the information that's available to us, I don't believe that anybody who was going into Starfleet, I mean, think about it. Kids would grow up and they would hear about the Borg. They would hear about the Battle of Wolf 359. They would hear about the Borg incursion of First Contact. Everybody's going to know who Captain Picard is. He saved the planet multiple times over. He's not just an American hero. He's a galactic hero. And I think most of the people who are going into Starfleet Academy are going to know. And they might not know who General Colin Powell is, but I think that, if you're going to West Point, if you're going to Starfleet Academy, you're going to know. You're going to know. I'm not saying all cadets are going to know, but it just, this idea that people aren't going to know who Patrick Stewart's Picard is, it's just bizarre. It doesn't feel real. Like, you can say to me, yeah, in real life, people don't know. There are cadets that don't know famous generals and all that. But if they're going to know who, say, Patton is, I mean, Picard's legend would live large, and I think it's not like he's. Do you not think that his picture would be around Starfleet Academy? That he wouldn't have been lecturing at Starfleet Academy since he left? I just don't think, especially if he's living in France, I would expect that Picard would speak at Starfleet Academy because that's the kind of person he is. If not being on staff, being a faculty member, that he would at least guest speak probably all the time. I find it very difficult to believe that anybody who's on Earth at Starfleet Academy would not know who Jean-Luc Picard is. I mean, it's funny because, sometimes you have to allow your audience, the real audience like us. I get that they're trying to make a joke that we understand because we're viewers. Of course, people are supposed to know who Picard is, but in the show, they want to make it seem like, oh, poor him. I mean, but even if you go and canonically, the character of Jean-Luc Picard is going to be 80 plus years old. And I just think that they, well, we'll see. I mean, what I'm talking about now is all I know about the show is the clip we've seen and these two pieces of key art. And the fact that the showrunners have been changed, and to me, it's such a strange idea. It's such a strange idea to me that they can't like knock this one out of the park. It's very odd. The Fleece 2 says classic films that you dislike. That's an interesting question. Like when you say classic films, are you talking about movies that are generally considered? I don't think that when you say classic films, I'm assuming that you mean movies that are deemed classics by others, not movies that classics meaning every movie from the 1940s or every movie from the 1950s. But I have to tell you that most of the movies that are deemed classics, if you go back and you look at the 100 greatest movies on the AFI list, there's very few that I would say I dislike, that I actively dislike. As a matter of fact, one of the things that I learned in film school when I was at USC is just how much most classic films, just how great they actually are. That's what struck me the most about films, classic films, is that usually they turn out to be better than their reputations. But then again, the way I've always watched movies has always been I've never had any prejudice against black and white movies or any era. I mean, I'll turn on a movie, and if it's a great story, well told, man, I'm in. I am in. Stubble McShave says, are the events of Star Trek The Next Generation canon in the Picard series? If not, it'd be weird to have TNG events have an impact on the series since it isn't part of the timeline. Well, that's something that again, Gary Beekler over at Nerdrotic and Midnight's Edge have talked a lot about. I know for a fact that there is some discrepancy between the license that Bad Robot and now Secret Hideout have been making modern Star Trek under, and the, I guess we'll call it the Berman era and the original series era. Star Trek from 66 to 2005 as we know it is different from the license. And this is what people, here's what we have to understand. When a company like Bad Robot and J.J. Abrams, very successful company in films and television, come in to take over a franchise, they were going to take over that franchise, which means they have control over everything. They weren't just going to come in and go, yeah, we're going to make a movie. That's not what a company like Bad Robot does. They were making deals to make merchandising, to make television shows, to do everything, spin-offs and all that. Now, it behooves them that it's everything that they're doing is what they wanted Star Trek to go forward. And that's what they've done, is whatever this new license that they've been able to extend it and move in with Star Trek Discovery and Lower Decks and the Picard series. And if they make Section 31, it's all under the auspices of whatever deal they made. I don't know. I haven't seen the deal, but that's what they've done. And with this new Picard series, it's strange to me, but the idea is, I think they're not leaning into other things other than this vineyard, because they can use the idea that Jean-Luc Picard as a character, his family came from Le Bar, France, and they have a vineyard there. This is something that is not violating, even though the idea of having a vineyard was created by somebody, other people, but it's probably something they could get away with. When you start referring to specific examples of things that happen in the actual proper of the Next Generation series, well, then you're getting into that's a whole different kettle of fish. But I think the reason that we're seeing this imagery from the idea of this vineyard is that's what they can get away with. They don't want to reveal their new characters yet, which to me is also strange. But we'll see. It's very weird. The whole thing is very strange to me. I'm like, this is marketing 101, you know? I mean, we're getting Picard back, but let's face it, Picard only means something to the diehard. Sure, he means something to the world at large, but right now, Jean-Luc Picard is a character from 25 years ago. You don't have kids that are 20 today that love Picard. I mean, maybe some do. I'm not saying they don't. But if you're trying to create a new audience, I don't think watching a man with a dog overlooking his vineyard as the sun sets is the way to go after a brand new audience base and energize and galvanize a whole new population of Star Trek watchers, especially when you're giving them a logo when it says Star Trek that goes all the way back to 1966. I don't understand it. I really don't get what they're trying to do. Alexander Wilson says, everything you said about Picard in the series is the same thing I said about Luke as a Star Wars fan, but you love that portrayal. Give it a chance. Look, we haven't seen the portrayal yet. Now, let me be clear, Alexander. I don't know if the show is going to be good or not. My fingers are crossed because I love Patrick Stewart as an actor and I want to see the show be great. Now, it doesn't bother me. See, the portrayal of Luke didn't bother me. That made sense to me because that seemed like a logical extension of where Luke would go. Nothing else in the new Star Wars movies made a whole lot of sense to me. But Luke made sense to me. I got it. That it might not have been where we wanted to see Luke go, but Luke is an old man. He's 30 years have gone by. A lot of life has gone by. That didn't bother me. Now, if Picard wants to be forlorn and mopey and all that, okay. But you've got to make sure that you've established why and how and all of that. And if it's done well, I'm like, okay, I'll go along with that. But look, my problem with the modern Star Wars movies is that they didn't tell the story of Luke, Han, and Leia. And Luke, and 3PO and Chewie and R2 and now I guess Lando, which is what everybody wanted to see. New characters are fine, but introduce new characters in the orbit around our classic characters and pass the baton. That's what the new series truly should have been, the end of the Skywalker saga. And all of these new characters we know that the galaxy will be safe with this new group of characters that have been influenced by Han, Luke, Leia. And the problem with the new trilogy is simple. The problem with the new Star Wars trilogy is that it was not a conclusion of the story of Luke, Han, Leia. Sure, we have conclusions of those characters in various ways, but not together. They needed to go on an adventure together. And why, I get it. Disney's like, these are old characters. We have to make new characters for the new generation. Well, you're doing Star Wars, you're doing another trilogy. You've got these characters. You kind of involve them, but not really. If you're going to involve them. Tell their story. Don't do it piecemeal where you never actually see Han, Luke, and Leia work together in an adventure. That was a mistake, and it was an easy mistake to rectify. But they thought because we spent so much money, they didn't have the guts to go back and do that, and that's what everybody wanted to see. If they had done that, it would have been a very, very different state of affairs, I think. But yeah, look, I'm willing to give it a chance, but the marketing of this says a lot about their mindset about where this show is going and what they're going to do. Matthew DeFrida says, I'm afraid season 1 will leave Picard somewhere dark. Of course. You know why? Because dark is easy. It's easy to take some character and make that character dark. Because life, you know what? Hey, life's depressing and ultimately getting older sucks. I get all that, and it's easy. And it's also fashionable. It's fashionable. I get it. Picard's already going to be in a dark place or something. I got it. All Good Things. Picard's it was dark when it was in All Good Things and Geordi comes to visit him. It's a bummer, Aromatic syndrome or whatever. Or what? I mean, it was a bummer to see where Picard was. It sucked seeing him old, tending to his vines, and it was supposed to be, because his mind was failing him. And Geordi went to check on him because he knows Picard deserves better. He basically had space Alzheimer's, and he was left literally in the dirt. And it was sad. And the fact that he was an old man tending to his vines was not a good place for Picard to be. The whole point was to get him away from there because he didn't deserve to be there. And the fact that that's where they have him now, it's just like nobody wants to see that. Draco Eris says the answer to your question is yes. I visited the previous installments of Star Trek and shows and films. That's great. That's good to hear. And what did you think? I'd be curious to hear what is your opinion now of the Star Trek franchise overall. JB Bonifacio says, what is the difference between Trekkie and Trekker? Nothing, but for a long time the word Trekkie was used derogatorily. It was the same thing as that guy's a nerd or that guy's a geek. Star Trek fans were seen as Trekkies. So the Star Trek community, they self-police themselves, and they came up with their own word, which was Trekker. And it's like, you know what, dude? Who cares? It's like other derogatory terms that have been taken by the people that were once vilified by those certain words. We've taken back Trekkie, and you can be a Trekkie, and it's okay. It was just I always hated the idea of Trekkie and Trekker anyway. I'm a Star Trek fan. I'm a Trekkie. I've been my whole life. I don't have a problem with that. I don't have to sit there and go, I'm a Trekker. Anyway, Wade O'Neill says, if I don't watch Picard, can I go on imagining Picard has had an enjoyable, relaxing retirement as a reward for all he went through in the TNG series? Sure, but you know what I would rather have seen? I would rather have seen how Picard reinvented himself the same way that, look at Clint Eastwood. The man is pushing 90 years old and he's still directing and starring in movies. I hope, at least if I'd made a Picard series, Picard would be doing something totally different, whether he was an archaeology professor, whether he was going off into deep space following the preservers or the Iconians or whatever, and charting their progress through the galaxy. Picard would be in a place that he was equally happy about. He was having a wonderful time. And indeed, maybe that's where they're going. That the whole point of Star Trek, I think, is to show that somebody can get older and still lead a very, very fulfilling life, the way we saw Admiral McCoy at the beginning of Encounter at Farpoint. He was how many years old, into his hundreds, or 138 or something, and he's still an admiral seeing an Enterprise off on its maiden voyage. That's where we've seen Picard. But no, they're going to turn him into the dark Picard, the Professor X of Logan Picard, because that's easy to do. It's a lot harder to do something where, let's put him in a place that isn't necessarily bad, that he's actually enjoying. It's just different. But again, like Alexander said, I don't want to judge a show I haven't seen yet before. So I don't know. So Wade, you can absolutely imagine Picard off somewhere leading a good life in retirement. Okay, you know what? I've got letters, people. As you know, I get letters all the time. And if you want to send me a letter and I can read this on the show, send me a letter at theburnettwork.net. You can also support these chats and support Robservations and the Burnettwork on my website. So please go there. And I'm going to work backwards. This first letter is a quick one. It comes from Ian Samuels, imagination connoisseur Ian Samuels, who says, Rob, this kind of letter is still difficult to write, but it is also important for me to open up and discuss these kinds of issues. Some years ago now, I was diagnosed as suffering from severe depression. This explains so much. For the first time, I had some understanding of the cause of many times of feeling down or feeling socially inadequate. At the same time, it frightened me. Whenever a doctor adds the word severe in front of anything, you start to listen. I resign myself to the aid of medication. Whenever I suffer my dips, one of the most important things to me, my writing, becomes difficult, sometimes impossible for me. My mind is still filled with ideas, but I can't get anything out. Being a writer has become an important part of who I am. But who I am when I cannot write? But who am I when I cannot write? These are the things that I struggle with. I tried to get back into my writing, but looking at stuff that I've done or is unfinished, I try and cast a critical eye over it. Instead, I become my own worst critic. To me, during these dips, everything I have written is no good. This leads to a purge, and I end up deleting much of my work. This has happened a number of times, and I've lost a lot of work that covers more than a decade. I am returning to university in September to do a degree in psychology. Not only is this something I've wanted to do for some time, I am also hoping that I will gain further insights into my own problems. Ian. Well, Ian, thanks for your letter. I would say that it's pretty great that you seem to have a grasp of your situation and you're doing something like going back to school, which I think is terrific. The only thing I would say about your letter is it's distressing for me to read that you deleted work because you didn't think it was good. Let me tell you something about all work, whether it's writing or whether it's filmmaking. I know most of it sucks. I'm my own worst critic. And, even Tango Shalom that I've been working on for a long time, I go back and I save every iteration of the versions of the things that I've worked on. And I look at these things and I'm like, man, this scene sucked. This was really bad. This was just not well done. Most of the stuff that we create, most of the stuff, any artist will tell you, any writer will tell you, any filmmaker will tell you, it sucks. The stuff we make is bad. And sometimes, the only reason Tango Shalom is, I think, it's turned out as well as it's turned out is we've had, because it's an independent film and money needed to be raised, it's as good as it is because we had the time. There were times I wanted to take my computer drives and throw them out the window and stomp them into the asphalt because I never wanted to see this movie again. But you stick through it. But knowing that you suffer from severe depression, don't delete your work. Never delete your work, because as any great writer worth their salt will tell you, great writing only comes out of rewriting and rewriting and rewriting. Very few writers are great the first time out of the gate. But listen, it's great that you got some help for this, that it was identified what was wrong, and that you're going back to school, which is, I think that alone proves that you're inherently optimistic and what you're doing is a great thing. And how many people go through life and never understand that, and they never get the help. But don't delete your work. Besides, if nothing else, it's awesome to be looking through your computer drives, as I've been lately, and you find something that you literally made 15 years ago. And it might be terrible, but you read it and you're like, wow, this is where my head was at. I've gotten so much better. And if you delete your stuff, you can't have that experience. So don't delete your work. Always come back to it. And know that the best thing about doing work is, especially work that isn't finished or work you haven't, is that no one's seen it. No one's judged. No one can judge you. All you can do is judge yourself. And I think that's pretty great. So don't don't erase your stuff. But congratulations on going back to school and good luck. Report back. Tell us what's up. Tell us what you're learning and any revelations you have. And what is school like? Is there hope in academia for anybody? Is progressive leftist politics destroying academia the way we've all heard it is? Or do you really think that there's a future in higher education? Report back. This next one this is a good letter, comes from Gunnar Anderson. Rob, first of all, I so enjoy your live chats as well as your contribution to the John Campea show. Over these past few months, you guys have become part of my daily routine. I started watching the show during the initial hype for Endgame, and I haven't stopped yet. On my own, I have a tremendous love for the Marvel movies and superheroes in general, but you and John have really added to the excitement and helped make each film feel like an event. I'm not sure about you, but the main factor in my love for superheroes is nostalgia. I thrive on the feelings of nostalgia, and since comic book heroes were such a massive part of my childhood, I'm still able to find great joy in them as an adult. When I was a kid, my parents divorced. Since both of them held full-time jobs, I was often left to my own devices for entertaining myself, and cartoons, comics, and action figures were how I chose to do so. I could lose myself for hours with a good story and the necessary figures to play it out in my own world. It is absolutely incredible to see how far the genre has come. I remember being in the minority thinking superheroes were cool. And now the same superheroes that I looked at as a kid, despite being picked on for it, are some of the most recognizable IPs in the world, and Endgame is the second highest grossing film of all time. My childhood was the 90s and early 2000s, so I've had the pleasure of seeing those characters go from obscurity to mainstream, and it has been a delight. I am an actor, and after a couple of years working in the Atlanta market, a great place to start a resume if anyone listening is an aspiring actor, I recently relocated to Los Angeles. A little fun fact, I booked my first audition after arriving, which was a wonderful welcoming gift. If I really narrow it down, I become an actor because of Superman the movie. I know that this isn't the most revered film to be inspired by. Goddamn right it is. You go right on being inspired by Superman the movie. But it was enough for me. Even as a kid, I had an understanding that Christopher Reeve wasn't really Superman. What? But I knew he was pretending to be. That understanding eventually grew to not only knowing he was he pretending to be, but that he was being paid to do so. His performance fostered a love of film and encouraged me to explore acting at a very early age. And although I fought the urge for a little while, there is truly no other thing on this earth that I am meant to do. It is people like you who have such a passion for creativity and imagination that make being in the industry so much fun. I very much appreciate that. Thank you. I spend so much time talking with managers, agents, and dealing with the business side of things that I have to step back daily and plug in to listen to people like you. However, let me just point out, I really would like to spend more of my days talking to agents and managers. You're a constant reminder that there's a passion for film and a genuine love for good storytelling. One day you'll see me in a movie or a TV show, and I can only hope that I can further that passion for film and imagination. Before I close out this letter, I do want to address something. When my father got remarried, I had to spend certain nights of the week with him at his wife's house. The house was unfamiliar and my room was in the basement. There was not a lot to make me feel at home, save a couple of things. I had my action figures and my portable DVD player. Remember those? I carried multiple DVDs in my bag at all times, including the complete Batman the Animated Series collection, the complete Indiana Jones collection, and the complete Superman film collection, as well as the 2-disc DVD of Superman Returns. When I couldn't sleep at night, which was quite often as the new place wasn't home, I would pull out my DVD player and watch special features. Requiem for Krypton was my absolute favorite. Oh, see, now you're going for my jugular there. I had no idea that was your documentary until a few days ago. And at that point, it was essential that I wrote you. That documentary was not only fuel to the fire for my desire to become an actor, but it beautifully captured the experience of making that film and making me feel like I was part of the crew. It also helped get me through a very odd period of adjustment, and for that, I truly thank you. Superman is a dream role of mine, so maybe you'll be doing the special features for my Superman film one day. I'd rather direct your Superman film, but I appreciate the sentiment. Keep doing what you're doing, my friend. It is really wonderful. All the best, Gunnar Anderson. P.S. I know you only collect Hot Toys, but over the last year, I've started collecting Marvel Legends movie figures only. I need rules because it's addicting. Hasbro has implemented a new face printing technology to match the likeness of the actor, and I would argue that some of the newer MCU figures rival their Hot Toys counterparts, minus the authentic outfits. I'd be interested to know if you've ever dabbled in the Legends figure line. I have found that collecting action figures is a hobby that perfectly captures the nostalgia of being a kid, and I figure that'll keep me young for a long time to come, no pun intended. Well, first of all, Gunnar, I want to... it's always, it never gets old hearing that you've made something that people like or that touches people. And, Superman Returns, that documentary, Requiem for Krypton, represented, well, it took me a year to shoot it all, to get all the footage shot, and then almost a year to cut it all together. it represented a very happy time in my life. I lived in Australia for a year, and every day I was on the set of a $200 million movie with my camera in hand, and I was able to talk to anybody about any facet of filmmaking that I wanted to know about. And because of my friendship with Bryan Singer, and I was with him all the time, everyone knew I had his blessing, so I could go anywhere and do anything. And what I wanted to do was something different from other documentaries. I wanted to give more of a fly on the wall perspective of you are there, and really turn everybody. I saw everybody when you're making a movie. To me, in my mind, both when I was making films and when I was covering movies, I saw the people that were making movies to be characters in this drama of bringing a film to life. And in the case of movies like Superman Returns, I'm a straight man, but I had great big love for people like Guy Hendricks Dias, who was the production designer, who was a singular personality, him and his wife, and the way he ran the art department, just how into it he was. And I really, one of the things you don't see in the documentary is I took him to all the sets that he had built, and I was hoping that we would have a third disc to put more documentary material. As a matter of fact, I thought one day if I could get away with it, I'd just go back and redo those documentaries in HD and make it 6 hours long and put all the stuff that I'd shot out. But it was amazing to deal with everybody, and everybody was very, very nice on that show, including most of the actors. And it was a wonderful experience, and watching that movie get made on every level was incredibly inspiring. I mean, it was a gigantic production. It went on for a very long time, and it was a great time of my life. And the fact that you like the documentary, I tried to do something that, again, hadn't been done before, and give it a more of a you are there kind of a feel, as opposed to talking heads interviews, which we don't have in that documentary at all. Talking heads interviews that had B-roll covering, illuminating the points that were being made. I wanted everybody to sort of infer meaning from what I was choosing to show them. But I'm glad you like that documentary. It pleases me, and congratulations on moving out to LA and pursuing your dream of being an actor. Stick with it. There's a lot of people that there's a lot of attrition here. People fall out. They think they're going to make movies, and they think it's going to happen quickly, but it does not, and it takes a long time. But if you stick with it, you never know where you're going to be. And all careers ebb and flow. Even the biggest stars can find themselves in a rut, and it can be a tough road. But you know what? I think well worth it if that's what you want to do. Wade O'Neill asks, my favorite Lovecraft or Poe stories and film adaptations. Oh my God, that's hard. I haven't read, I've read the poems, like in terms of Poe, but in terms of Lovecraft, I do like a lot of the short stories and novels, but I don't know. I read Lovecraft when I was young, and I haven't read him really since. And in terms of the adaptations, I don't think we've yet seen the best adaptation of H.P. Lovecraft yet. I think the idea of the old gods, the Cthulhu mythos, I don't, we say things like John Carpenter's in the Mouth of Madness was Cthulhu-esque. Certainly Stuart Gordon's movies, everything from Beyond and Reanimator and Dagon and things like that are they kind of touch on that, but I think we have yet to see the definitive H.P. Lovecraft movie, because the idea of those gods, how do you commit something like that to celluloid? I mean, in a way, this is kind of weird, but Stranger Things, the idea of the mind flayer or whatever the upside down is, and that and the Mist, especially the feature version, Frank Darabont's feature version of the Mist, while those creatures are more monster-esque, and they don't quite go beyond as much as the old gods of Lovecraft, they point in that direction. And I felt that the portrayal of the upside down, because we don't really know, like, we don't know what the upside down is. They keep showing it to us, and they show us creatures that they say, or people have pointed out, those are Lovecraft-esque. But really, the one thing that's been missing from any H.P. Lovecraft adaptation is the idea of the very essence of what these creatures are. They're so other, and the human life is so meaningless to these old gods. And I don't know how to convey that. I mean, this isn't a very great answer, but I'd have to come back to you on that one. Although that's kind of what that was just what jumped into my head. Don't know what to put. Robert, I love The Next Generation, but if I had to hear a highly localized disturbance in the space-time continuum one more effing time. No, it's true. I mean, there was definitely certain tropes and techno babble in The Next Generation that I think was a shortcut to not having to explain these things. And again, one of the interesting things that I really learned about when I was making the documentaries for the Blu-rays was that the first two seasons of Next Generation, they tried to emulate Star Trek, where there was going to be some outside force or character or alien, or situation or something that would affect our crew, and our crew would have to go solve it. But what happened with Next Generation, which I think not only saved Next Generation, but saved the Star Trek franchise, was when Michael Piller came on board and took over in the third season. His mandate that all of our stories now began with members of our crew. They began with the crew, and whatever was going on had to relate directly back to our characters, as whether it was Picard, whether it's Data, whether it's Geordi, whether it's Troy, whatever. It had to involve one of our crew members. And sure, they still had their B stories, but once that happened, once that change happened in Next Generation, it solidified how the show was going to be different from the original series. And I also think that it made the show more personal for viewers. And that's when Star Trek: The Next Generation became great. And, unlike the original series, which I would say that 75% of the episodes are good to great, I would say with Next Generation, only 25% of the episodes are good to great. There's a lot of filler. There's a lot of episodes that are half-baked that don't really work. But I think when the third season came along, it really helped out. And of course, Deep Space Nine did that as well. I mean, after the first season, again, they were trying to figure out what kind of show are they going to make. And people would say that they changed the premise of the show every season, which is kind of true. But really, what I loved about Deep Space Nine was it was a show first and foremost about our characters. And all of these situations, we got to see how the Dominion War affected our characters. And I thought that was a great way to go. It was really, Deep Space Nine, it was both epic at the same time. It was very personal. And I thought that really was an interesting tact. Yeah. So let's see, I got another letter, and this is a good one. This is from our friend Cal over in from Swag Props. He's in Malaysia. And by the way, I don't know, I cannot wax rhapsodic enough about Swag Props and what Cal, I got to get the disposable income. I want this so bad. So at Swag Props, Cal's company, one of the things he does is he makes prop books from movies. I know he'll tell you, if you go to his website, he'll tell you why, or if you go to his Etsy page, he'll tell you why he hasn't done a Necronomicon book from the Evil Dead franchise. And I agree with him. But what he did do was he made a prop replica of the Book of the Nine Gates from Roman Polanski's movie, The Ninth Gate, that I have huge love for. I love The Ninth Gate. It's one of those movies where people are like, yeah, it was okay, it was good, but it's not. I don't know why you love it so much. I love The Ninth Gate for whatever reason. I just love it. And he makes prop replicas of the book in The Ninth Gate, not just the book, but all the different versions of the book from The Ninth Gate. And if you go look at it, it's totally cool. And if I had an extra $400 I could just lay out, I would buy that book. I'd get Lucifer's version of it because it's awesome. So anyway, this comes from Cal, aka Swag Props. Hi, Rob. I recently came across an internet poll asking people what movies they thought deserved sequels but never got any. And while most respondents named some of their favorite movies like Dredd, John Carter, and The Man from U.N.C.L.E., amongst others, by the way, I agree all three of those need sequels, my immediate thought was that my favorite Star Trek movie to come out after the end of the Berman-produced movies. And no, it's not J.J. Abrams' 2009 take on Star Trek. God knows that spawned enough sequels to make us beg for them to stop. No, I'm talking about Peter Weir's 2003 film, Master and Commander, The Far Side of the World. Well, sir, you and I both park our shuttlecrafts in the same shuttle bay because I have often said to people that's the most Star Trek movie I can possibly imagine that isn't actually a Star Trek movie. I had read a couple of Patrick O'Brian's Aubrey Matern books in my teens, which I borrowed from our school library, so I had a vague recollection of the characters when the movie was announced. First of all, Master and Commander that Paul Bettany is in and Russell Crowe is based on a series of Patrick O'Brian's Captain Aubrey books, and there's like 20 of them. Master and Commander is just one. And I've read two of those books based because I love the movie so much. And I've always wanted to go back and read them all, but they're fantastic books. I had read a couple of Patrick O'Brian's Aubrey Matern books in my teens, which I borrowed from our school library. So I had a vague recollection of the characters when the movie was announced. I remember questioning the choice of Russell Crowe as Lucky Jack Aubrey. But when I saw it in a local Cineplex when it premiered in Malaysia, I was blown away. The film is a sweeping, by the way, I was too. If you guys haven't seen Master and Commander, get it on Blu-ray, go watch it on the biggest screen you can, hopefully with a thunderous surround sound system, because it's awesome. The film is a sweeping epic adventure that was made with meticulous attention to historical detail. Although they did change a couple of things from the novel, the enemy frigate's nationality, for example, it was the American ship USS Norfolk in the book, but in the movie it was French, the Acheron, presumably so as not to alienate American audiences. Probably right there. It had plenty of drama too, and I was totally invested in the fate of the characters, particularly Aubrey himself and his close friend, Dr. Matern, played immaculately by Paul Bettany. But it was the Star Trek vibe that I got when I watched it that endeared the movie to me. I've always said to my friends that this is the best Star Trek movie never made. Totally agree with you. Totally agree with you. Despite its period setting, it just resonates on so many levels as an original series adventure. There are elements of adventure, exploration, as well as epic battles, and I couldn't help but be amazed at the similarities between the close friendship of Aubrey and Matern had with that of the trinity of Kirk, Spock, and McCoy. While Aubrey, like Kirk, displayed charisma, bravado, and cunningness, Matern possessed both the nationalism and the curiosity of Spock, as well as the compassion of Dr. McCoy. The battles in the film also reminded me very much of those in Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, or Balance of Terror. Both had our heroes square off against a powerful adversary, and both had them gaining the upper hand through cunning battle tactics. The Far Side of the World was meant to be the film to kick off a series of films based on the books, but I guess it wasn't enough of a box office hit to justify a sequel, despite being nominated for 10 Oscars and finally getting 2 for Best Cinematography and Best Sound Editing. As recently as November 2017, Russell Crowe tweeted that a sequel may be coming, but nothing much has transpired since then. It is a shame because if any movie deserved a follow-up, it is Master and Commander. It is, in my opinion, one of the best films of the 21st century that unfortunately not a lot of people saw. Sincerely yours, Cal, aka Swack Props. Cal, again, buddy, you nailed this. Master and Commander is a wonderful movie, and as you pointed out, probably the closest thing to a Star Trek movie, a real Star Trek movie, that we may get ever again. I mean, and again, the reason for this is because, of course, Gene Roddenberry himself said one of the great influences for Star Trek and Kirk and company was the Horatio Hornblower novels. And yes, there's a TV miniseries you can go watch. But I mean, Star Trek is at its heart, it's a naval show. It really is. And a lot of the original series episodes, like Balance of Terror, are all based on naval battle tactics. Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, I mean, many of the capital ships battling it out. What was so fun about Star Trek II was we're so used to seeing space battles on the space lake. but his pattern indicates two-dimensional thinking. When we really started seeing the X, Y, and Z axis being used for battle. And that was so cool to see. And I love that. And if anybody hasn't seen Master and Commander, The Far Side of the World, you are missing out, because it is a phenomenal model and movie. Did I say model? See, I got models on the brain because I'm going to finish my Saturn V rocket here. I swear to God. Yeah. So we have another letter. And this letter comes from Luke B. Luke B. Hey, Rob. I recently saw George Takei's documentary, To Be Takei. As expected, it was a really insightful look at his life. But as always, George never shies away from taking shots at, you guessed it, William Shatner. Frankly, I got tired of this vendetta a long time ago. Like you, I love Star Trek, and I would like to think that the cast of Star Trek did get along. Obviously, they did not always, and that's fine. Just because you work with somebody does not mean you have to like each other, but it seems George has made it his mission in life to discredit William Shatner, and that's kind of getting old. Based on this documentary, it seems George Takei's ego is as big as Shatner's. Could it be that George did not get the success William Shatner did, and he is simply jealous? His allegations that Shatner was unpleasant to work with were supported in the past by the rest of the cast. Nichelle Nichols, Walter Koenig, James Doohan, and even Leonard Nimoy all had their issues with Shatner. So there must be some truth to it. Shatner himself is sometimes apologetic, saying that in an era where he was the star of a TV show and had a family to support, he was under a lot of pressure and might sometimes have been overbearing. However, he is sick and tired of his name being tarnished by George Takei for events that happened over 50 years ago. This also ties into your recent question about the art, if the art outweighs the monster. Do George Takei's allegations of William Shatner ruin your Star Trek viewing experience? And as somebody who has met and worked with William Shatner, do you think George is right? Is William Shatner the self-centered egomaniac George Takei makes him out to be? Or is George making it worse than it is? What do you think, Luke B? Well, it's funny. Sometimes I have to stop and pinch myself that I actually did write and direct a movie that starred William Shatner, among other people. And my experience, I can speak directly to my experience with William Shatner. Working with him was a dream come true. It was a joy. Every day was a joy. Now, I will say this. Mark Altman and I, Mark, who produced the movie, and he and I wrote Free Enterprise together, we knew that Shatner could be prickly. And we read a lot about him. Mark and I just we already knew a lot about him, but we went back and we watched a lot of his comedic appearances and, the old sabotage, and we listened to all that stuff. Now, here's what I got before I'd work with William Shatner. William Shatner does not suffer fools gladly. He does so much stuff in his life. His time is precious. What he wants from you is he wants and expects a level of professionalism that you don't just aspire to, but that you work at. And I'll give you, there was one time on Free Enterprise where he got a little prickly to me, but I learned an important lesson, and I've told this before. The first day he worked, we were shooting on Wilshire Boulevard at this movie theater, and now it's a performance venue called the El Rey Theater on Wilshire Boulevard. It was hectic. Why we were shooting on Wilshire Boulevard was probably a mistake, but we were stupid. We didn't know what we didn't know. And we're shooting this scene, one of the first scenes of the movie that he appears in, on Wilshire Boulevard. And everybody was nervous. Everybody wanted to do a good job. Most of all me. I was very nervous. My DP, Chuck Barbie, who did a wonderful job, he was nervous. And when William Shatner came out on the set the first time, Chuck was still tweaking. We're still trying to get the lights perfect, but we were tweaking. We were not ready to shoot. And we called Shatner out to shoot. And Shatner, totally cool, takes me aside. And he was very stern with me. And he said, listen, Rob, when you call me to the set, this is our time to work. It's our time to block. It's our time. You can make adjustments. It's our time. I don't want to come to the set while other people are working. I want to come to the set when it's my time to work, because otherwise that's interfering with my performance and it's interfering with the work you and I are going to do together. He was cool about it. He said that to me, and I said, Bill, because you don't call him William. Everybody knows him calls him Bill. I said, Bill, that will never happen again. And it was one of the most important lessons that I've learned in my career. Now, unfortunately, I've not directed another movie, but I've produced things and directed other things. And I have learned a great deal about working with actors, but that was a very important lesson, because on a movie set, everybody is very myopic. They're doing they're trying to do their job. They're not thinking about other people's jobs, because that's not their job. Their job is to do their job. Their job is to the grip and electrical department are thinking about what's the next setup. How can we do this as fast as we can so the production team has as much time as they need, the DP, the actor, the director, to get the shots they need. Everybody's trying to do their own job. And sometimes everybody on a film set also forgets that the actors, despite how much they're being paid, the actors are also there to do their jobs, and they want to do their jobs the best they can. And Shatner told me first time out of the gate, that's all he needed to say. And after that, I think he had a great time, because we knew that we were working with Shatner and we treated him like the Godfather, great respect. And perhaps we might have overdone it a little bit with our respect, but Shatner appreciated it. He knew that he was being taken care of by me as a director and by the production team. And he understood that we were trying to run a tight ship, that even though we were making a very budgetarily challenged independent movie, that we were, in fact, let's face it, paying him a great deal of money to be in. He still did appreciate, because look, Shatner doesn't care about, he cares about his money, obviously, but he knew he was getting well paid. He always gets well paid. What he wants to do, like every actor, they want to be in a great movie and they want to work with great people that are serious, period. That's all anybody wants. And I think that we certainly won him over, and he was delightful. Now, there was one day it was a long day. We were going to go over 12 hours. We budgeted for an overage. We were going to be in this one location, this club called the Garden of Eden, for 16 hours. Shatner, I had to have a conversation with him. I'm like, Bill, this is a 16-hour day. We're in this one location and you're in most of the shots. You're in most of the scene. 16 hours. Are you cool with it? Rob, I'm cool. No problem. That guy, he worked for 16 hours, and 16 hours in, he was smoking stogies on set. He was joshing with the crew. He was having the best time. There was no reason that an actor who'd been working at this time about 40 years, that he needed to be as jovial and fun to work with on a 16-hour day as he was. The guy, his performance didn't suffer. Everything he did was amazing. And I have nothing but great things to say about William Shatner. But it's the way you approach it. Now, when it comes to the original Star Trek series, remember, Star Trek was never the hit that anybody thought it should be. It was going to get canceled after season 2. There was the letter writing campaign to save it. It was expensive. What people forget is that Star Trek was not a cheap show at the time. It was one of the most expensive television shows ever made of that time. And he was the star, and the fact that it wasn't a number one show, the fact that it wasn't pulling down the numbers that it should have been, if they had been able to chart demographics and age groups, it would have been a huge hit. But they weren't at that time. They were looking at just very specific numbers. Shatner was Star Trek, and if Star Trek was failing, that meant Shatner was failing. He had an inordinate amount of pressure on him. And I'll tell you something, if you want to read or listen to a very interesting historical account, there is an Inglorious Treksperts podcast about a letter that Gene Roddenberry wrote to Leonard, Bill, and DeForest Kelley about conduct on the set and how you people should act, because Roddenberry himself was fed up with all three of them. Yes, even DeForest Kelley. So check that out. Do I think, should people let bygones be bygones? Look, making motion pictures and television or any kind of art, especially when you're working in a big collaborative medium like film or television, shit happens all the time. And it's a very intense environment. But if you want to hold a grudge for the way somebody acted on the set of a TV series that, failed after 3 seasons and was embattled after 2, That's your problem, and I think you should let it go. And even Shatner, has tried to make sense of his life and what Star Trek has meant. You read his many books. He's a pretty self-aware guy. And yeah, does he have a healthy ego? Certainly, as a lot of people do. But my experience with him 20 years ago was phenomenal. And I have nothing but the finest things to say about him, because he was a joy to work with, and he lived up to all of my expectations of him. And I should have been probably terrified to work with him, even though I was very nervous, but he made it very easy, and he taught me a lot. And that's all I can ask from him. And I think that anybody who works with him, Shatner's like a 2-take guy. When he comes in, he wants to do 1 or 2 takes, and then he's done. And if you're going to do another take, a 3rd or 4th take, you better have a reason why. And that was something I dealt with a lot. Eric McCormack would always look at me like, I know that, because Shatner's first takes are never that great, to be honest, because he's figuring out like what to do. He's like, and his second takes, he always nails it. And sometimes the camera will mess up or something, and you need to do a 3rd take. But for the most part, I mean, Shatner shows up, and he's just a consummate professional, and he wants you to be too. And I love working with him, but that's what I think happens. And if you are not, like, if you listen to that sabotage thing when he's recording lines for a game, don't tell William Shatner how Captain Kirk would say something. That's not how you direct William Shatner playing Captain Kirk. And like every great actor or every great creative person, they're always testing you. And it's important. Part of your job is to know when you're being tested and step up and not fail those tests. It can be volatile, but in the long run, it's definitely worthwhile. And I couldn't say more good things about William Shatner if you paid me to, because I thoroughly enjoyed working with him, and it was one of the things I will cherish most in my life. Really like that. Joseph Arak says, will you ever get John Campea and Elizabeth to be on the show? I've talked to Elizabeth about being on the show. I think Elizabeth would come on the show. I think it'd be very interesting to have her on the show. Like I had my mom on the show. I could interview Elizabeth. I think it'd be fun. I'll get Elizabeth to be on the show. Campea, I could get on the show. I don't know. I've never thought about that. I should. Alexander Wilson asks, Nana Visitor asks if Kira was a terrorist in modern norms, and she said yes is the answer. What is your opinion on that notion? Oh, I absolutely think Kira Nerys is a terrorist, but she had to be, because remember, the Bajorans, a nice, peaceful, religious people, were fighting an occupying force in the Cardassians that were exploiting their resources and certainly exploiting them. So she absolutely was a terrorist. People have said that the Bajorans were analogous to the Palestinians. I don't necessarily agree with that. And that made the Cardassians the Israelis. I don't agree with that at all. But Kira Nerys is absolutely a terrorist. And but she had to be. She was a freedom fighter trying to liberate her planet. Now, I don't know if you'd believe this. Maybe you would. I have a letter from Willow Yang. I've been saving this one for the end, because this letter is just when I think Willow Yang could not write another letter that would amuse me as much as her last letter did, well, Willow Yang comes through, and she certainly comes through today. And Willow. So this letter is from Willow Yang, one of our most prolific and beloved letter writers, our favorite PhD candidate, our favorite molecular biologist, our favorite traveler to Boston, Miss Willow Yang. And I still haven't heard whether or not Willow has actually made sure that the table of information that's going to, along with her article that she's hoping to get published in a very prestigious science journal, did she actually solve this mistake? Maybe she said in the chat. I hope she has, because I want to see this letter published. I think it would be a great boon to everybody here, all of us imagination connoisseurs. It would be a great, and all of you aspiring writers, if BL Alley is out there, the fact that Willow Yang is going to get published in a prestigious scientific journal, even though she made a mistake that she later went and fixed. This is exactly the kind of uplifting story that we need to hear. But anyway, before that, I have another letter from Willow, and it's a change of pace. Greetings, Rob. I cannot believe that I'm writing this, but you asked for it. So here it is. My thoughts on John Wayne's The Conqueror. I've never heard of the film until I took a biological statistics course with Dr. Michael Whitlock, who is a great professor and also one of my colleagues' committee members. Here's how he described the movie in his book. The analysis of biological data. In 1955, John Wayne played Genghis Khan in a movie called The Conqueror. It was not an artistic success. More unfortunately, the movie was filmed downwind of the site of 11 previous above-ground nuclear bomb tests. Of the 220 people who worked on the movie, 91 had been diagnosed with cancer by the early 1980s, including John Wayne, his co-stars, and the director. According to the large-scale epidemiological data, only about 14% of people of this age group on average should have been stricken with cancer within this time frame. We want to know whether there is evidence for an increased cancer risk of people associated with this film. I'm admittedly not big on Westerns. The genre is very American creation that I just never really got into. The first John Wayne movie I saw was The Searchers, which I actually watched for a first-year English course in college. To be honest, I don't really have much of an impression of the movie itself. I know it's sacrilegious to say, seeing that The Searchers is often regarded as one of the greatest films ever made, but I was going through a bout of depression at the time, so that might have hindered my enjoyment of it. What I do remember, however, is my teaching assistant hating the movie for having a former Confederate soldier, John Wayne's Ethan Edwards, as its protagonist. Her synopsis of the story was something along the lines of, it's about a racist who goes out searching for his niece who is kidnapped by Native Americans with the intention of killing her because he thinks she's become a savage, but then in the end realizes that she's still white and brings her back home. Unfortunately, I think that her perspective is probably shared by many modern viewers who may find it difficult to enjoy older films that depict sensitive and problematic subject matter. Of course, many modern viewers will also be outraged with the casting of John Wayne as Genghis Khan in The Conqueror, a decision that's often regarded as one of the most egregious miscastings in Hollywood history. Personally, however, I wasn't offended by the movie's racial insensitivity. I actually found it hilarious, watching a bunch of white actors pretending to be Mongolians and other Asiatic groups of people. I have to take something seriously in order to be offended by it, and the laughable dialogue and nonsensical story of the film just made it too ludicrous for me to take seriously. I'm almost glad that I didn't have to see a cast of Asian actors debasing themselves in this monstrosity of a movie, and also getting exposed to ionizing radiation during the filming, but I'll get to that later. For a movie called The Conqueror, there wasn't much actual conquering taking place. Instead, the majority of the screen time was devoted to scenes of exotic women dancing, people carousing inside tents, and an eye-rolling romance between John Wayne and an equally miscast Susan Hayward as Bortai. The dialogue was stilted and cheesy, the acting wooden. I haven't watched enough John Wayne films to gauge his prowess as an actor, but his abominable portrayal of one of the most infamous and iconic rulers in recorded history certainly did not leave a good impression on me. I love the way Willow writes. His Genghis Khan was a buffoon, a brash and lecherous bandit who repeatedly makes mistakes, who gets himself ambushed and captured due to his own carelessness, and who utters atrocious lines like, I feel this Tartar woman is for me and my blood says take her. His character failed to invoke any fear or reverence. I could not buy into him being the ruthless but tactical warlord who would go on to conquer half of Asia. The romance between him and Bortai alternated from being cringeworthy to laughably ludicrous, as exemplified by classic quotes like, "You're beautiful in your wrath." If I wanted to see a woman being seduced by a macho warlord named Khan, I'd watch Space Seed again. That's why I love you. Ricardo Montalban, a Hispanic actor, might have not been the best choice to portray an Indian man, but at least he brought a power and gravitas to his character that was sorely lacking in John Wayne's performance. I'd like to point out, by the way, that Khan was genetically engineered, so he probably had little bits and pieces of lots of different ethnicities in him. He was mentioned as being a Sikh, which is a monotheistic religion, not necessarily a race of people, but I digress. Even ignoring the flagrant whitewashing, what would not hold up well to modern viewings, The Conqueror was just an abysmal movie. Surprisingly, however, in spite of its countless flaws, I didn't actually hate it. It's not quite so bad that it's good like The Room, but it did have more than a few unintentionally comedic moments. My favorite scene happened near the end when Genghis Khan spots his treacherous sworn brother at a Tartar camp. My brother, he says, charging towards him on his horse. Die, traitor, die. He takes a half-assed swing at him with his sword, misses, turns, and gallops away. I don't know what the intent of the filmmakers were when they shot that scene, but it definitely garnered a few chuckles from me with its sheer stupidity. Thus, even though I don't consider The Conqueror to be an artistic success by any stretch of the imagination, I do think it has some entertainment value. But of course, there lingers the question, is there evidence for an increased cancer risk of people associated with the film? The proportion of people who got cancer amongst the film crew was 91 to 220, which equals 0.41 or 41%. Is 41% statistically significantly higher than the 14% in the general population that it's unlikely to have occurred just by chance? There are several methods of determining this. The one we used was to calculate the 95% confidence interval, which is the range where the true average cancer rate for the crew likely lies. I guess the best way to explain this is, if we repeated this experiment 100 times by having the crew film at the same location, on 95 occasions, the cancer rates will fall within this interval. Without going into details on the mathematical equations, the 95% confidence interval was between 35 and 48%, which is much higher than the 14% of the general population. Thus, while I personally don't think The Conqueror is the worst movie I've ever seen, it is a movie that has literally given people cancer. Yours sincerely, Willow. I bow to you, Willow. I bow to you. Uh, you should start your own YouTube show, the Philosophy of Life according to Willow Yang, because I would certainly subscribe and send you super chats. I adore getting Willow Yang letters. It's become one of the joys of my life, and I never would have met Willow. I mean, she always obviously supports the John Campea show as well, but I really appreciate everything you write, and it's a joy to read these letters, because you also, not only are you a genre fan of science fiction, fantasy, and horror, as evidenced by whether it's a super chat or your letters, you have one wicked sense of humor, and you're a terrific writer and a great intellect. So thank you for that. I very much appreciate this letter. What a fun letter. And I'm never going to think of The Conqueror the same way again. I just won't. Well, with that, I mean, I can't follow that. I'm going to bring this chat to an end. Robservations chat number 169. After Willow Yang's letter, I don't know where to go after that. What do you guys think about all these topics? Please comment. Please subscribe. Please like. YouTube analytics are very important. By the way, I have to say, since you're still here, I had one of my first YouTube videos demonetized, so it can't get ads. It was the video I did on Judi Dench, John Wayne, and cancel culture. Yes, indeed. I was demonetized. Somebody may have reported the video or whatever. They said it was not suitable for advertisers. And I watch a lot of other YouTube pundits. And people have been talking a lot about this in the YouTube space, about mostly conservative voices being silenced. But I guess this idea, I was just, as with everything, I'm reporting on something, and it was interesting to me that Judi Dench's comment about what are we going to do with problematic individuals? And she was referring to Kevin Spacey. Are we just not going to watch those movies anymore? Are we going to look back at the plays that he was in charge of while running the old Vic? What are we going to do? And I think that's an important question to wrestle with, but it was interesting that the video was demonetized yesterday. Fascinating. But that's what happens when you're working in the public arena these days. But I want to thank all of you for being here. I want to thank you for supporting the channel. It really means a lot. I want to thank you for supporting the Burnettwork.net website. That means a lot as well. It's great to have these kinds of chats and have everyone participate. I want to thank my moderators. I want to thank Terry. I want to thank Jim. I want to thank Greg, and most of all, Mike Bodden. You moderators are fantastic. You make this job easier, and you guys go a long way toward making this community, the Post-Geek Singularity, the most hospitable community, especially the most hospitable geek community on YouTube. So thank you very much for that. I also want to thank Lucky Tiger for sponsoring these podcasts. You can go to getluckytiger.com, buy any of their great men's grooming products for those men who want to look good and feel great, and use PGS when you check out to get a discount on your entire order. So thanks to Lucky Tiger. And I want to remind everybody on the Burnettwork, I've been living the Lucky Tiger life, my little videos. There's been 2 of them. I'm going to drop another one, I think, this week. Thank you for watching those. And I won't be on the John Campy show this week. Next week, I'm going to be, of course, at the San Diego Comic-Con. I'm on panels on Thursday, Friday, and of course, Sunday. For those of you who have ever come and seen us at Starship Smackdown, it will be the 17th year, my God, the 17th year in a row we have done Starship Smackdown at the San Diego Comic-Con. What is Starship Smackdown? Like I've said, it's like The Matrix. You can't be told what Starship Smackdown is. You just have to experience it for yourself. But if I might, if you Google NPR and one starship to rule them all, just put that all in some Google search. NPR actually did a story on Starship Smackdown a few years back. And also, if you like Star Trek, if you want to hear me opine about Star Trek subjects, I cannot recommend the Inglorious Treksperts podcast enough. It's not my podcast. I'm just a frequent guest on it, but it is the brainchild of Mark A. Altman and Darren Doctorman. And it is one of my favorite. Even if I wasn't on it, it's probably, if not the greatest Star Trek podcast ever done. It's one of the greatest Star Trek podcasts ever done. We've been celebrating this year with various stories the 40th anniversary of Star Trek The Motion Picture, which is what we're going to be talking about at San Diego. But there's frequently people that worked on Star Trek, actors. Last week, we did a podcast with Jeffrey Combs, which was amazing. So check out the Inglorious Treksperts podcast, which is available wherever you get your podcasts from. I want to thank everybody for writing letters in, not just Willow Yang, but all of you letter writers. I think they're fantastic. Please, if you like someone's letter, we usually put those up on the website. Comment, report back to them, tell them what you think. I think it's really great that on the website at the Burnettwork.net, we're creating a very interactive community with people. And I'm constantly amazed. You know, you guys are a good bunch out there. I'm very fortunate to have these, to have you imagination connoisseurs, you member of the Post-Geek Singularity community, to be here. You make it all worthwhile. And we're just getting started, even though this is chat number 169. There's a lot more to come, a lot more new stuff. And I want to thank you all for being here. And remember, every person you know has a story to tell you have yet to hear. All you have to do is listen. And with that, I bid you all a better day.